Let's face it, chances are high that everyone watching this video is a fan of the Final Fantasy series, or at least knows a lot about it. Of course, it's Square Enix's flagship RPG series. What you may not be aware of though is that in the 1990s, Square was cultivating a rival RPG series, the SaGa franchise, and dedicated just as much energy to it. In fact, when Final Fantasy IV was in development, both series had an equal number of games. When it came time to release Romancing SaGa for the Super Famicom in 1992, it's safe to say that many RPG fans anticipated it in the same way they anticipated Final Fantasy IV. Now, it is true that Romancing SaGa was eventually remade as Romancing SaGa Minstrel Song for the PlayStation 2. In 2022, that version was also remastered and re-released for Android, iOS, Steam, Switch, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5, but we'll get to that part later, because my first experience with the game was with the original SNES version, or more accurately, the Super Famicom version, because this game was never originally localized in North America. If you want to play that version, you can still pick up a fully translated English patch at the link in the description and play this one in its original form. Regardless of which version you play, the story and basic mechanics are similar, even if the visual presentation in the remake is quite a bit different. Romancing SaGa utilizes several mechanics that made it stand out from other RPGs. First, when you fire up the game, you select from one of 8 protagonists, each of which has a different story and special abilities. Once you make this choice, it's locked in for the entire game, but it really doesn't change the main story narrative too much outside of a unique, character-specific opening scenario. In fact, this and the other Romancing SaGa games feature a very non-linear approach, and you aren't locked into a set chain of events as in other RPGs. There is an overarching narrative, but you're given a lot of freedom to explore, complete various quests, and trigger storyline events in an order of your own choosing. The game's creators called this the free scenario system, and it's influenced all other SaGa games since. Another unique facet to the Romancing SaGa games is that there aren't random encounters. Instead, enemies appear on the screen that you can walk past and evade. Generally, the enemies move toward you and try to attack you as you walk by though, so it's difficult to avoid them all. Like the other SaGa games, Romancing SaGa doesn't even have actual levels either. Instead, you have a random chance to gain stat increases after battles in which you performed an action tied to that stat. For example, if you use a sword against an enemy in battle, you have a chance to gain a hit point raise. Using martial arts makes it possible to gain agility increases, and using spells gives you a chance to have your BP raised. And speaking of BP, that's a stat similar to magic points in other RPGs. Each skill takes a specific amount of BP to use. Unlike other RPGs, each character's hit points are fully replenished after every battle, which makes healing in between battles a non-factor. Characters can equip several weapons, and each equipped weapon opens a new subset of up to 4 skills that can be used in battle once the weapon is fully leveled up. It does take some time grinding to gain access to all of each weapon's skills, which incentivizes long-term use of powerful ones. Also, you can use up to 6 characters in a party at a time, and characters are placed in formations with 3 columns of rows. Characters in the front row take and deal the most damage, characters in the back row take less damage and deal less damage, and attacks and defense of the middle row characters are averaged out. In other words, it's a lot like the Final Fantasy games, just with a middle row added. The only problem with this is that unless you engage the enemy in battle head-on, your formation will be disrupted, and you may have to spend turns changing rows to avoid taking too much damage or hampering your ability to deal damage. The last thing in this long list of characteristics unique to Romancing SaGa games is the character recruitment style. There isn't a set order to recruit characters, so you're free to basically explore the world, trigger storyline sequences, and find who you can. There were parts of the game where you can get stuck with a few characters for long lengths of time until you find others, but I did notice that some of the characters can be obtained from pubs. In all honesty, Romancing SaGa can be a frustrating and difficult game if you can't recruit enough characters fast enough, and it's easy to be outnumbered by enemies in the beginning part of the game. But I guess that's the allure of the game's free-roaming open-ended style also. As far as the story goes, Romancing Saga takes place in the world of Mardius. A war long ago raged between three wicked gods, Death, Saruman, and Shirach on one side, and the Lord of all gods Elor on the other. At the end of the conflict, Death and Shirach were stripped of their powers, and Saruman was imprisoned through the power of the 10 Fate Stones, which were given to a legendary hero named Mursa for safekeeping. After the passage of 1,000 years, though, the Fate Stones were lost and scattered throughout the world, causing the forces of evil to awaken from their slumber and set out to free Saruman. 8 heroes then emerged to counterbalance the dark forces, which happen to be the protagonists you can select from. Each has wildly different backgrounds and personalities, but all of them have the potential to, you guessed it, save the world. The soundtrack for Romancing Saga was created by Kenji Ito, who worked on the second Saga title on the Game Boy as well. I especially enjoy the main theme, which became a staple for the series and was incorporated into Romancing Saga 2 and 3 as well. You'll find a great assortment of fantasy tunes here that aren't too unlike the quality of the work of Nobuo Uematsu. Because the two worked together at times, it's also quite possible they influenced each other's style. Each of the 8 protagonists have their own theme, which are honestly really good, and there's a lot of other great tracks too. In my mind, this soundtrack deserves 5 stars, it's really good. As I mentioned earlier, Romancing Saga was remade and repackaged into Romancing Saga Minstrel Song for the PlayStation 2, then remastered and re-released in 2022 for many modern platforms. This version retains the story and most of the mechanics exactly, but the graphical presentation uses an exaggerated, cartoony style that gives the characters big heads. It also uses a combat system that looks much more like the newer Saga games. Now don't get me wrong here, I'm glad Square Enix finally found a way to modernize the game so a North American audience could play it in an official capacity for the first time. But as you guys know, I'm old school, so I like the original graphical style more. I just have to admit, the cartoony look seemed to me to cheapen the serious fantasy motif the game was going for. I think Square Enix did a way better job preserving the original feel with the Romancing Saga 2 remaster than with this one, but they were clearly going for a different approach there. Overall, Romancing Saga is a good early Super Famicom era RPG that a lot of people missed out on. It used many unique concepts creatively, especially for the time, and gave the player a sense of exploration not found in many other titles like this. The difficulty level is a little too high, and there's way too many swarms of enemies at times. I mean, just look at this. Ah! And this. No! Just realize that the lack of random encounters certainly doesn't mean less encounters. But hey, if you can get over those things, there's a lot to love here about Romancing Saga. I think most fans of retro RPGs will really like it if they haven't tried it, just don't expect a pure Final Fantasy clone. But now I want to hear from you. How do you think Romancing Saga matches up with the other games in the Saga series? What sticks out about it to you? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content, and please join my Discord community linked in the description. Also, please consider supporting my channel via YouTube's Join feature to receive member exclusives, such as advanced videos and complete video transcripts.